Welcome to the Charity Changemakers podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and action for the changemakers of the world. Each week, we dive deep into the world of impactful charities. We connect you with the passionate leaders, the innovative ideas, and the real-world stories that are making a difference. Whether you're a seasoned non-profit professional or just starting out, this podcast is your chance to learn from the best and get fired up to make a positive change. We'll explore the challenges and triumphs of running a successful charity. We'll hear about the fundraising strategies, impactful programs, and the stories of the people whose lives are being transformed. But most importantly, we'll leave you feeling empowered and equipped to take action in your community and the organisations in which you work. So, buckle up, changemakers, because we're about to embark on a journey of inspiration and impact.
Today I'm joined by Claire Walsh, who's the Director of Income Generation and Marketing at Crohn's and Colitis UK. You're going to love this conversation. There's so much in there for you to take away, from learning from Claire's experience and her rise to director level role within fundraising, and her generalist experience across a whole range of different income streams, and being able to take those opportunities as they come, qualifications and training, and mentoring and learning from others through the sector. There's also some really interesting parts of the conversation where we talk about some fundraising in an international context. Claire has lived and worked in Singapore and Hong Kong, as well as then some reflection on her time at Crohn's and Colitis UK and managing a team that's gone from being very office-based to being remote-based, and some of the opportunities and challenges that come with that. Personally, I'm absolutely delighted that Claire agreed to come onto the show. I've never met Claire and hadn't spoken to her before, but reached out to her to come on the show as I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis nearly 20 years ago, and the charity's been a great support to me, and I've been a member for a number of years. So the opportunity to highlight the incredible work that they're doing. You'll notice that there's some links through to a variety of different places on their website in the show notes for today. So if you're suffering or going and need to use their symptom checker, then please do follow the links below in the notes. Guys, it's enough from me. It's time to meet our changemaker. Hi, Claire. It's great to have you here on the Charity Changemakers podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. No, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And as we do with every guest that comes on the show, we like to kick off with some quickfire questions, a bit of an opportunity for us as the listeners to get to know you, put you on the spot a little bit, I realise as well. But so we'll fly through these. But tell me, where's the most interesting place you've ever visited?
I think it's going to be a bit of a cop-out because I actually lived there for a bit. But Singapore. I lived in Singapore for a couple of years and loved it. Enjoyed my time there. I didn't work for the whole first year I was there, and basically explored the entirety of Singapore. It's quite small, and saw everything I could possibly see, and loved it. Loved the place.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we have to follow that up with then best recommendation of place to visit if you're in Singapore.
Oh, I mean, it's a bit touristy, but it is lovely. So they have these sort of super trees, which are man-made, and there's a bar on the top of one of them, and you can go up, and then you can see all the light shows from up there. And basically you buy, I think it's like $40, and you get a free drink or something, and then you can just stay up there for hours, and it's lovely. Yeah. Great view of Marina Bay Sands, that very famous hotel, the one which looks like a boat on three pillars.
On the top of the three buildings. Yeah. No, that's great. I, in my last role for Sailor Society, I used to have to visit Singapore 2 or 3 times a year. So I can remember those trees that you were talking of. I guess my recommendation, there was a great comic. There's like a comic book cafe. I can't remember where it was, down in Marina Bay somewhere.
Yes, there is. Yeah. I
can't remember the name.
Where you get milkshakes with yes, and it used to come with a little capon, the milkshake cup. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's my recommendation if you're in Singapore. So
that is lovely. Yeah, that is good. Yeah, I don't think that's there anymore, sadly. I think last time I went, it's gone.
Ah, right. Okay.
It's probably moved. It's probably moved somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay. Well, don't do that if you're in Singapore, because you can't. Do something else. So yeah, plenty to do. So that's good. So second quickfire question for you then. What are you reading at the moment?
I am reading a book called The 100 Years of Lenny and Margot. I think I'm about a third of the way in, and it was recommended to me on sort of like a perimenopausal Facebook group, which I'm part of, and it's brilliant. I love it. It's set in a hospital. Lenny is 17, I think, and she is dying, although we don't know yet what of. And then she meets Margot, who I think is 83, which makes up their 100 years. Yep, that makes sense. And they're sharing their life stories.
Yeah,
and it's just lovely.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And no spoilers, because obviously you're only a third of the way through. So
that's true. Yes, I don't know what happens at the end.
Good.
I'm hoping it's not too sad.
Yes, yeah. Well, from what you just shared from there,
actually thinking about it, I'm sure it's going to be sad. I'll make sure I'm not reading it on a train, so when I start crying, no one can see me.
And final quickfire question for you then, or we might know the answer because reading could be the answer, but we'll try for something else. What do you like to do outside of work to relax?
Oh, I don't know if it's very relaxing. So I do. It's a bit mad, really. I do a boot camp thing at 6 o'clock in the morning, 3-4 times a week, which is not relaxing in the slightest. It's like a HIIT workout, but it's you have like 6 stations. But I love it. It's probably the only exercise thing that I've ever stuck to, and I've been there for a couple of years. But it's a really nice group of people. Feels very community-y, and I really notice that if I do it in the morning, my brain works much better that day than the days when I don't do it. So I think it is very good for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But it's not relaxing. I do yoga as well. I'm recently into yoga, which I love. I haven't quite got into the mindfulness of it. I spend most of my time just lying there thinking what I'm going to have for dinner, which I don't think is what you're meant to do. But I feel like that's a journey. I'll get there eventually with that.
Yeah, indeed. That's something that comes with practice, like you know, with your HIIT workouts, and then consistency that comes with it. But there's something in there, I think, actually about creating space and time for you. And it's amazing how I think the brain does work in that way. That even when you're out there doing exercise, it gives you that opportunity to. Come down from some of the stuff that maybe you're thinking about, but also you get some of those light bulb moments as well, don't you? So
yes. I feel like my brain is on fire afterwards. Probably only for a short period of time, but that's probably when I'm most productive when I get back from that, which is good.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's great, lovely. Well, thank you. That's really helpful. Great to get to know you a little bit more. Obviously, these conversations with people that we've got coming on the podcast are very much about people's career journey into the charity sector and how they've got to where they are now, and things that have helped and influenced them along the way. And I know it always feels like a really big question when I say to someone, well, how did you get into the charity sector? But it's always interesting to hear, because you find that not many people sort of set out with that ambition when they were growing up to become a charity professional. How did you find yourself in the sector?
So similar to that, really. I think I did international relations at university, and I had very high hopes I was going to go and work for something like the UN or something, but I don't speak any other languages, so I'm not entirely sure why I thought that would work. And I worked in a car company for a year afterwards while I was saving to go travelling. Hated that. Realised that was not for me. Went travelling for a bit, came back, and then I got a temp job at Macmillan Cancer Relief, as it was then, because it was so long ago, in their community fundraising team in Coventry, which is near where I grew up, and fell in love with it. Just loved the interaction with people, loved the buzz of the office. Every day was different. Even, some days I'd just be photocopying, but it always felt like there was a point to it. So just fell in love with that. And then a job came up in corporate fundraising in Macmillan's office in London. And I applied for that and got that role, and then moved to London like over that weekend or something, and lived in somebody's living room for a very long time, a year, I think. And I don't know if corporate fundraising was necessarily for me, but I loved the charity sector. I loved the charity, Macmillan. And then I was there for a couple of years, I think, working for 2 different teams, one in the City of London, one in the Midlands. So very different corporate partnerships, which is super interesting. And then I moved from there to Alzheimer's Society, which it's unbelievable now, but it was tiny then. There was about 40 of us. It was really small. And I was both events, fundraising, and corporate. That's how small it was at the time. And we didn't have any corporate partners. We constantly complained about the fact no corporate partners would ever work with us because we were so stigmatized, because Alzheimer's was wasn't often talked about then, back in those days, which must have been 20 odd years ago, 21 years ago, something like that. And so I really only did events there. But loved that. And then sort of carried on with that for the rest of my career then, I suppose. So I went from there to prostate cancer, UK. Again, was tiny when I joined there. I think I was the fundraising manager for community and events because there was hardly any of either at the time. But had a very interesting trajectory there.
Yeah, indeed. I suppose what those opportunities gave you is, I mean, already you've talked about 3 organisations that, and there's corporate events and community fundraising. Yes. There's across. I mean, I guess that relationship, that partnership working is at the heart of all of those. But there is that, exposure to a variety of different ways of generating income.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's sort of been a feature of my career, I suppose. Really, so I've sort of done little bits of everything, I think. Yeah. So even when I left prostate cancer, I moved to pancreatic cancer and joined there as the director. But it was a very small organisation at the time. We didn't have a huge amount of different income streams. We were very reliant on events there as well. So I did a bit of trust fundraising. I did a bit of legacy fundraising, sort of proved the concept, and then we'd be able to hire somebody in to take over that work. And those were all things I'd never done before, really. But I just copied what other people did, and it worked out all right. I'm not a trust fundraiser by in terms of skills. I don't think that's not really my area of expertise, but I did enough to be able to prove that it worked. Yeah. And then we got somebody who's much more qualified and much more of an expert in to take it over after that.
But I think what I'm reflecting on and hearing in the conversation is actually, I mean, your trajectory through the fundraising career was, there was opportunities there, and it was quick to progress. I mean, I don't know what that timeline looked like, but I guess from that Macmillan opportunity, I mean, were you then, when you moved on to Alzheimer's or prostate Cancer UK, were you managing teams in those roles, or were you progressing at that?
I think Alzheimer's was my first management role. And I was sort of a supervisor of, I think she was a recent graduate, a woman called Sharon, who was amazing. And so that was sort of my first start in management. And then when I moved to prostate cancer, it was a bigger team. And then obviously and actually that grew at prostate cancer because I was there. I think I started as the fundraising manager for community and events, but then I got Movember on board. That sort of changed transformed the way the charity existed, was funded, and then I became a head there. So then my team was much larger, and I had sort of more hierarchy underneath it. So I was managing managers, and they were managing officers and assistants. So it grew from there, and then now I'm a director of both fundraising and marketing and communication. So I manage, in my team there's probably about 48 people, so which is about half the charity.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a big bunch of people to be able to manage and have that oversight of. And in those early days and in that growth in your career, I mean, were there influential people, I guess, within that, that you were learning from, or were there courses, training, qualifications? What was helping you to make those steps, as well as clearly, your personal approach and your good results in fundraising? Yes,
I did. I tried to do as many courses as I possibly could. Anything which was on offer, I'd always sort of put my hand up for. I think probably the ones which was most instrumental was I did a certificate of marketing, which was interesting, especially for somebody who'd never, my experience and my degree were not in those areas. So that was interesting for me. And then lots of things around management, lots of things around strategy writing, budgeting, all those sorts of things, sort of getting, I guess, the basics under my belt, media training, stuff like that. And then I've just done a CEO course. So that was a years-long course with Bayes Business School, which has been really interesting. But yeah, I think I've done a lot of training in my time. And then I've worked for some brilliant people. So there was a person I worked for at prostate cancer who, it was because of her I became a head. And then actually she moved to pancreatic cancer and she put me in touch with them. And that's where I became a director. So she was quite instrumental in my career. She was great, sort of not official, but a great mentor and just a great sort of guide and support, I think. Yeah. And just boosted my confidence, I guess. She told me I could do it, and I believed her, even if I didn't believe myself. So that was quite handy.
Yeah. I mean, the power of a coach or power of a mentor in that type is, I think again, it's a consistent thing that we're hearing across the podcast. I know it's a reflect on my journey has been so vital because, like you say, there are times where you think, blimey, how did I end up in this in this scenario, this position? But it's great to have those champions, isn't it, on the sideline that are cheerleading for us and supporting along the way. So, which is great. So that step into the first director level role, talk about that transition, what that looked like, and how, I guess the journey that you were on at that point.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I think this person who put me forward for that role saw in me that I could do it. I'd always been a fundraiser by background. I hadn't done marketing and comms at all, but as I said, it was quite a small charity at the time. Again, it's grown massively since then, which is fantastic because they do amazing work at Pancreatic Cancer UK. But so sort of moving into that space where there was stuff that I just was doing which I'd never done before was uncomfortable, but great. It was a great challenge. I really relished it. I liked it. I learned a lot very quickly. And I suppose it was there, which was sort of where I became who I am now, I think. My leadership style probably changed a little bit there, and I had a great team that did a lot of great work and challenged me, and actually they were all experts in their fields, which was fantastic, and actually I learned probably quite a lot from them. So although I was the lead and I was managing them, often they were the experts and I was just asking semi-intelligent questions and interrogating their ideas to kind of make sure that it would work for the organisation. So yes, that was quite an interesting transition from kind of being really hands-on to being less so. And it was quite slow, I suppose, because actually there, especially in the fundraising area, I was doing quite a lot of the fundraising still. As I said, I was sort of doing stuff, proving it worked, getting somebody in, and then slowly sort of removing myself from that hands-on stuff. To become more strategic. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's obviously quite often we see people go on that journey. I guess the director maybe in a smaller organisation before they end up in a bigger organisation. But that transition, like you say, from being the hands-on community events fundraiser where it's so much going on to that working on the strategy, obviously working with a senior leadership team, working with a board of trustees. It's about learning and gaining that experience because like you say, there's that bigger picture view that comes into focus. But quite often in those moments there can be quite a lot of focus on the fundraising and the marketing and communications teams, can't there, from above, and that working together to make the sustainability of the organization. So how did you find that, I guess, that working in that different way and that more senior interaction and that strategic side of the work?
Yeah, I think it probably took me a little while to settle into it. I think probably for a little while I was doing both in tandem. I was being sort of that hands-on, probably annoying everybody in the team, but also doing that sort of more strategic stuff with the board and with the senior leadership team. And I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult to let go of that hands-on stuff because that's kind of what you've always done, and actually that's probably what got you into fundraising in the first place. That's the stuff you like, and if you're organised and practical and love that sort of stuff and love the buzz of it, it's quite hard to sort of put that to a side and sort of work in a very different way. But I think actually then doing this sort of senior leadership stuff and working with the board has its own rewards, and it's different, but it's still great. And I think you get your buzz changes, I guess, because your buzz then comes from getting something approved by the board. So having presented your plan for the year or your new strategy, and getting questions and challenge on it, and then getting that approved, I think that becomes your new buzz. Rather than that kind of hands-on event, especially when I worked in events, kind of tangible, in your face stuff that you used to get when you go to events and run those sorts of things and get the feedback from people on a regular basis in terms of the participants. So it's kind of changes. But also I suppose for me as well, it changed with my age. So probably, maybe I would have changed anyway in terms of that, because I would have, that sort of adrenaline rush that you got from events, I possibly would have grown out of anyway.
Yeah,
I think it was probably too exhausting. I had a small child at the time, and I was probably too tired for that by then.
Yeah. But I suppose I think what's always really interesting about the sector as well, though, is that even when you go up the ladder and get into more senior roles, there's still going to be, and I think this is regardless of whether you're in a £500,000 charity or a charity that's turning over tens of millions of pounds, there's probably still, even when you're the director, there's still going to be opportunities where you're needed because you need an event, or you need to be public facing in a community fundraising pitch or whatever it might be. There still comes that time when you're going to get that buzz, because most fundraisers have got that entrepreneurial spirit and and people side to them as well.
Yes, and absolutely that is what kind of keeps you rooted to the organisation, because as a director, sometimes you are a little bit removed from the people who use those services or the people who are fundraising for you. So actually going to events, going to the London Marathon, Great North Run, I now love doing that, and spending a weekend cheering or chatting to people after they've been running, making them coffee, giving out sandwiches, or speaking to people at a major donor event, talking about the charity, because those are actually sort of also where you hear all the best stories. So as somebody coming into an organisation new, as I was with Crohn's and Colitis UK, I didn't really know much about the conditions at all, but actually going to those events and meeting real people and hearing those stories really, educates you, but also gives you sort of those the stories that kind of fuel your work, but also when you're going out to talk about the organisation, you've always got those people and their stories in the back of your mind, which actually is super helpful.
Absolutely. And obviously you've been at Crohn's and Colitis UK now for four and a half years, as director of income generation and marketing. Tell us a little bit about the charity and what they do, and then it would be great to hear more about the team and what that looks like as well.
Yeah, so the charity's been around for about 45 years. But I'd say we feel quite entrepreneurial still. I think there's been a huge amount of change in the time I've been here, and more change to come, absolutely. I think we are professionalising in a way that we hadn't before. So we're changing the way we talk about ourselves. We're changing the way we provide services. We're looking at our brand, all of those sorts of things. So we're transforming, I think, and will be for the next 5 years probably. We've got a new strategy coming, which will be exciting, which really will look at sort of where we want to be in the future. But I joined in the January of 2020, so just before COVID, and that change obviously was significant for us. We went from being all office based in Hatfield to all working from home like most people, and actually we haven't gone back to working in the office. We run a really hybrid system, so the office is open every day. People can go if they want, and some people do, but other than that, we have 4 mandatory days, 1 per quarter, where people need to be in the office to meet their colleagues and do projects around the organisation and the new strategy, that sort of stuff. But other than that, most people can work from home and work remotely, and it's been fantastic for us.
Yeah, has that transformed the way in which you've recruited individuals into the organisation from being very Hatfield centric, I guess, to then saying, well, it doesn't matter where. So you talk about 45 people in your team. Are they spread all over the place now? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, we've got within the organisation, we've got people in Scotland. In my team, we've got quite a few people in Wales. We've got people down in Hampshire. They live by the sea. It's very nice. Very jealous on a regular basis. So yeah, people everywhere really now, which has really sort of again transformed the organisation, because yes, before we really struggled to recruit because Hatfield was only really attractive to people who lived relatively close to Hatfield, because people didn't want to travel from London to Hatfield necessarily. And where the office is it's difficult to get to via public transport, not impossible, but more difficult. So we often found it difficult to recruit, and especially for fundraising, experienced fundraisers, because our pool was quite small, whereas now we can recruit everywhere and anywhere, and that's really been brilliant for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just, like I say, it just opens up a whole, you go from that small pool of candidates to, thinking nationally and the type of organisation that you are and bringing people in. And how have you found managing people in that sort of remote way and I guess instilling that positive culture, and especially, talking about an organisation that's been going through change and, change to come, how do you bring people together in that way?
Yeah, it's I think it's tricky. I don't think we've necessarily nailed it entirely yet still. I think the things you miss out on are those sort of, those traditional water cooler moments where you meet in the kitchen and you'll chat about something and then you just say, oh, by the way, I heard from this person, or I saw this online, or those bits are what you miss naturally. But so that you have to engineer them a little bit, I suppose. So we have, especially through COVID, we had regular coffee catch-ups. We have something with an organisation called Coffee Roulette, which is quite cool, where basically everybody puts their name in a hat, a digital virtual hat, and then they get divvied out somebody to have a coffee with. So, I could end up speaking to somebody in the data team or somebody in HR or wherever. And, it's a complete mix and complete luck who you get. And that's quite nice because actually you get to meet people in an informal setting and just learn about them as people, which is quite nice. So we've done a bit of that. We have a staff forum who are really passionate about getting people together virtually. So we have a book club that's just starting, a Strava club, which I don't know a huge amount about because I have not signed up to that. But yeah, lots of these sort of engineered but brilliant activities which get people to sort of understand and know their colleagues a bit better. So I think I was a bit fortunate in a way because when I worked at Habitat for Humanity in Hong Kong prior to Crohn's and Colitis UK, and obviously because that's Hong Kong based, but lots of our partners were across Asia. We did a lot of stuff virtually. So, everything was done on Zoom, pretty much all meetings were done on Zoom. And we were managing partnerships that way. So and actually my interview for Crohn's Colitis UK was done virtually because I was overseas still. So I sort of got a bit of early insight into how it could work, which I think then helped when we did go into COVID and we all worked virtually. But yeah, I still think it's not perfect. I think you do miss that human interaction in person, and sort of just that stuff where you can ask somebody a question over the desk, which is so much easier, isn't it, than having to Teams message them. But one of the things I try to do is be available. So if somebody has a question, I'll always say, just pop me a message. I absolutely don't mind answering it. Email me, book some time in my calendar. I'm here for you. So, use me if that's helpful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that social element of the coffee roulette, the Strava club, the book club, those types of different things. Clearly, people have got that option to engage and to, like you say, get to know, particularly in a larger organisation, get to know people across different departments and different things that people are going. Because it's just that, I think when you're not in that office environment, you can lose that understanding of what other people are doing in the organisation, don't you? And suddenly your only pain point is your own and not aware of other things that are going on. Can lead to tensions and difficulties, I think.
True.
No, that's good. And you mentioned there about I know we're jumping about a little bit here, but you mentioned obviously about being based in Hong Kong for a little while, as well as obviously Singapore at the start of the conversation, and obviously working within charity sector in both of both of those countries. Talk to us a little bit about that. Is fundraising in an international context? We haven't had anybody on the show so far that's done that before. Does it look and feel different, or is it similar? Yeah, what's the crossovers like?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Singapore, I found it very difficult to find a job there. So I went from being a director of fundraising and comms and a deputy CEO at Pancreatic Cancer UK to then going to Singapore and finding it very difficult to get a job. And I think it was there that I realised that work is such a huge part of my identity. I hated not working, which I'd never really realised before. So and it's a very different charity sector there, I think, especially the local charities. So it's a little bit like the UK was previously, so very volunteer led, lots of sort of fundraising committees, that sort of system. So, and also as a foreign worker, it's quite difficult for people to give me a job because they have to have established that nobody locally could do that job. So I did get a role eventually at the National Cancer Centre, which is their sort of flagship cancer hospital. And I'd always worked in cancer, pretty much apart from that bit in Alzheimer's. So that was handy because I did have the experience there. I took a job which was as a digital, I can't remember the job title, digital fundraiser, something like that, which I had no experience in. I've never done digital fundraising. But it was interesting. Again, it was that kind of hands-on stuff. So I had to sort of create, develop and then deliver digital fundraising campaigns, which they'd never done before. It's quite a complex process there. Singapore has lots of rules and regulations, especially around data.
Sure.
I mean, not dissimilar to the UK now, but yeah, so things like using MailChimp, or there was always a process that you had to go through. Everything had to be signed off by a number of people. It's quite hierarchical there. And what I ended up doing there in reality was the director who had recruited me, she left, and I sort of took over a big fundraising campaign that we'd started, which was their first big public fundraising campaign, and actually the first of its kind in Singapore. It was, a significant investment, whole scale, cross country campaign in order to raise money for the cancer centre. And a very interesting experience. The campaign itself was beautiful. It was amazing. We had people with cancer who were photographed as part of it. It was their story. It was about making more survivors. We did it with a UK-based agency actually, and it looked amazing, but it failed miserably. It probably couldn't have raised less than it was. I can't remember what the target was, but we were hoping to raise millions. And I'm not sure even when I left we'd raised even 100 grand. It was a proper sort of disaster, which was just so interesting because we tested it. We'd been really careful about where we were advertising, what we were doing, who we were using as the spokespeople. Like we'd done it perfectly, but it just didn't resonate with the local population at all whatsoever.
Yeah. And sometimes I think sometimes you have those campaigns, don't you, where they just don't land, don't quite hit the right chord. Can be so soul destroying when you put so much work and effort into something. But I guess you learn from that, don't you, from whatever comes next in the fundraising world. Yeah,
and I think actually what I learned was because it was so hierarchical, there were obviously lots of layers above me, and the idea had come from sort of the director of the cancer hospital, and he'd seen it happen in the US, and so it made absolute sense that we could do it in Singapore. But I think what I learnt was that when we were testing it with local people who'd always, born and bred in Singapore, worked there their entire lives, it didn't resonate with them. But actually everybody at the hospital, well, not everybody, but the majority of people who worked at the hospital had international careers, or they'd studied overseas. And so they had a very different outlook. And they'd seen these sorts of things elsewhere in the world. And so they all thought it was amazing. I mean, we did. We thought it was amazing. It ticked all the boxes. We loved it. But actually, the testing we did with local people, we should have probably listened to more. And actually, I was in a slightly difficult position because I was only the digital fundraiser, and they're probably thinking, why are you even involved in this campaign? Understandably. But, being able to try to, I think if I was going to do it again, I would really try to have those conversations with the senior leadership team there to say, this is not resonating with the people you want to be your donors. So we probably should pull it. But yeah, it was, it wasn't for me to have that conversation
Sure.
in the position I was in. But I think now if I'd done it again, I'd probably just have that conversation regardless. And
yeah, that's right. No, I mean, it's really interesting, really fascinating. I mean, my limited experience of sort of fundraising, obviously across Europe and then North America, and then parts of Hong Kong and Singapore, is that your approach actually does tend to. And we learned, fortunately for me, I was following a superb fundraising director into the role who could pass on that knowledge to say actually your approach in some of these territories needs to be quite different. But I think, and I think what you're saying is it absolutely needs to be a very donor focused. I mean, actually, everything that we did in Singapore ended up really being appealing to the expat community and taking them on sort of corporate events, weekends away type fundraising events, and probably not so much from a local audience, local donor base. So,
Hong Kong was different because Hong Kong was international development, so that was interesting in itself. So Habitat for Humanity build houses for people in places like, well, for Hong Kong, our sort of sites that we supported were places like the Philippines, Bangladesh, those sorts of places. And again, what was interesting, I think, was the expat community were very passionate about building houses for people in those places, Philippines, Bangladesh, whereas the local community, I think, were very passionate, understandably, about making things better for people who live in housing in Hong Kong. And housing in Hong Kong is a perennial problem. Big high rises, people living in what they call subdivides, which is basically the size of this room separated into essentially 4 flats, which you've probably seen on the news, those sort of coffin homes, which are real, they exist, they're horrific. And if you think how many of those you have in a building. So as a Habitat for Humanity being an international organisation and very much focused on building houses for people in need elsewhere across Asia, we had to sort of shift and move so that we were a bit more in the space of Hong Kong housing, which was a challenge, I think, but worked fairly well. But it was always a little bit of a challenge.
And were you managing teams in those scenarios, or is it sort of a sole fundraising type position?
So actually in Singapore, I only managed one person, a lovely guy called Stephen, and in who is a local Singaporean, and then in Hong Kong I managed a team there, which was a mixture of people from Hong Kong and a couple of expats.
Different approaches, different ways of doing things, or learnings that you've taken from your time in Singapore, Hong Kong, that you've then been able to bring back obviously to your current role and transfer.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think people are people, aren't they? So they have very different approaches. So I'd hate to sort of like put everybody in a box, but I think especially in somewhere like Singapore, there is hierarchy is very important in the organisation I worked at, which was government funded as well. So it's possibly because it was a government organisation. But, there were meetings I was allowed to attend, but I had to sit on the outskirts and I had to observe and I wasn't allowed to speak. And people found it very unusual if I would speak to a doctor directly, because that wasn't the way the hierarchy works. It should have been my manager's manager that spoke to somebody. But obviously having worked in the UK, and actually lots of these doctors having studied in the UK or in the States, we didn't necessarily sign up to the same hierarchy, I suppose. And things around reputation, I think, were very important for people there. So you have to be very careful about sort of giving feedback, because people might take offence to it. So there was lots of cultural differences, which were really interesting. And sort of the culture, especially in places like Singapore and Hong Kong, actually, I think because lots of people live with their parents still until they're much older. So actually they don't want to go home. So they stay in the office quite late. So just the sort of lengthening of the office day was really interesting. They weren't necessarily always working, but, work would be where they were more social, but they'd do it in the office rather than, here, I suppose we go to the pub or go to a coffee shop, but there they sort of stay in the office. until they went home to bed.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Before coming back the next day, yeah, nice and early. Yes, yeah, indeed. No, fascinating. And do you think so? Your leadership style. I mean, you talked about that. I guess always very different to what you experienced in Singapore about always being available. There, if you need me, I'm here, and it's sounds like a very open, transparent approach to leading the team and how Crohn's and Colitis UK work. You think? How would you sort of I guess describe your it's a kind of difficult question to answer sometimes, but how you would. Sometimes it's nicer to reframe it and go, well, if we ask your colleagues how they describe your leadership style, what would they say? I mean, how would you sort of describe that approach? Do you think?
Yeah, I think I would say that I'm supportive. I guess that's I try to be a supportive manager, and to be available to everybody. So not just the people who work. So now at Crohn's and Colitis, we have heads, then we have managers, we have officers, we have assistants. And I'm available to everybody if anybody needs me. And that even includes, in the weekends or in the evenings, people don't necessarily contact me, but I would much rather somebody did than worry about something overnight or over a weekend, because it's probably an answer I can give them very quickly. Or if I can't, then I'd find the answer for them. So I'd much rather people, ask me than worry about something. So I think I'm supportive in that way. I think I trust people. I trust people implicitly. And I expect people to be honest. And I think I'm honest and I'm quite transparent. And I'm sort of authentically me, I suppose. What I've realised in my career is that, there's many a time when I was pretending to be something that I wasn't, and it was so stressful and tiring. And actually, I've put that to bed now, and I am me, and, I'm not everybody's cup of tea probably, but, I am unashamedly me, and I can't change that. And I can't be bothered to try to change it either because it's too tiring. So I think, I am, I probably wear my heart on my sleeve. I've probably got no filter. So I am quite open and approachable, and not that I expect those things from other people, but I will trust people until sort of that trust is broken. And I like people to be honest. I mean, if something's going wrong, just tell me. I have had plenty of experiences where things have failed, as I've mentioned, or things have gone wrong. And actually, the worst thing you can do is try to hide it. So, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So just tell me, and then we can work through a solution. And I'm really happy to help with that. And actually, we all learn from those things. So we all learn from those failures or those disasters or something that's gone wrong. And so I'd much rather we all be open about that and talk them through, because actually we won't do them next time.
No, that's right, indeed. I always think that's a really good barometer of an organisation as to how it responds to, either mistakes or where things have gone wrong. And absolutely, to see, not to, put people down in those scenarios, but like you say, well, either we learn from that, or how can we, what can we do to make it right? And working together, and that team mentality. And they see that demonstrated from their senior leaders, then that's absolutely the way it should be. So that's really, really good to hear. And what's coming up for Crohn's and Colitis UK? Some exciting things on the agenda. Look, from a personal point of view, I'm delighted that you came on the show. I know that we haven't really met before, but we sort of sent out the message to Ashley to come on. I was diagnosed with colitis nearly 20 years ago, and obviously been a member of the charity for a number of years, and obviously grateful for the support and the communications and everything that we received from colitis. So for me, it was a bit of an opportunity to raise the profile of the charity, hopefully, and bring you on. But talk to us about maybe ways in which we might be able to support, or things that are on the horizon that are coming up.
So we've got a new strategy coming. So that should launch next year. We are in the process of writing it. We have a new chief executive starting next week. So that'll be exciting as well. We are looking at our brand and how we talk about ourselves and how we serve people with Crohn's and Colitis. And are we serving that entire community equally? Are the people that we're missing in terms of our services or our information provision, and really sort of deep diving into all of that sort of stuff to make sure that actually we are here for everybody with Crohn's and colitis, and that our services are relevant to people and are sort of meeting them where they are through the channel that they want it to be, or the way that, the format they want it in. So I think there's going to be some really key, exciting pieces of work that we're going to be launching later this year, but early next year as well. We're also starting to do hoping to do a big advertising campaign towards the end of this year, because one of the things that people with Crohn's and colitis always tell us is that not enough people know about the conditions, and they certainly don't understand the severity of the conditions. So, often there is this perception that inflammatory bowel disease is, diarrhea or stomach pain. And what we need to talk about is that actually it's not diarrhea and stomach pain in the way that I, as somebody without Crohn's and colitis, would experience it. It is debilitating. Sometimes you cannot leave your house. Sometimes you are in A&E multiple times and then end up having emergency surgery. These are highly debilitating, chronic conditions. And treatments are available. Early diagnosis is key for people. But I think people with Crohn's colitis are really clear with us that actually we need to make sure that everybody actually understands what those conditions actually mean on a day-to-day basis for people experiencing them. So big campaign hopefully coming soon around that. We, as you said, we're a membership organisation, so our membership is growing month on month, which is great. We've got about 58,000 members, and there's about 500,000 people in the UK who have Crohn's and colitis. So we're meeting a good number of them, but we would like more. So if anyone experiences the conditions, then yes, join us as a member. Get lots of great information, and a can't wait card which you can use to access toilets. And our fundraising has just is amazing. People support us year in, year out, and they do fantastic things for us. Our virtual events have transformed the organisation, I think. So our events team have introduced a number of those, and I think actually for the Crohn's and colitis community, virtual events are really attractive because they can do them when they want, where they want. You can plan your route. Where the loos are. You don't have to do it on a specific day if you're feeling unwell that day. So they've been hugely successful for us. We're just on sort of a growth trajectory, really. This is our last year was our third year in a row where we had raised more than ever before, and hopefully that'll be the same again. So our target is to raise $1 million more than this year, which is quite significant.
It's not a small number, no.
Not a small number, but so far, touch wood, we're on track. So
Brilliant. No, that's great to hear. And I think from my point of view, it's the resources that you give that enable you to have those conversations with friends and family. Because like you say early, I guess I was in a scenario where my dad had colitis and been caught very late in him, and ended up in things you were talking about, major surgery, intestine being removed, all of that. And that message drummed home in me from a very, very young age is any initial sign, you get yourself to the doctor. And that early diagnosis has meant that for 20 years, touching wood again, at this end, of remain in good health and under control with medication and support. So
last year we launched a symptom checker, which was and we did a big advertising campaign around that, and it was targeted at sort of 18 to 24-year-olds, because we know that younger people are much less likely to go to their doctors about symptoms, much less likely to even identify the symptoms, but then probably won't go to their doctors either. So we have a symptom checker on the website where you answer, it literally takes 30 seconds. You answer a few questions, and then at the end it will tell you whether you should go to see your GP or not. And you can also print a letter, which means that you can take that with you as a resource to the GP, which gives you a bit of confidence starting that conversation. But we've had, I think it's 250,000 people use the symptom checker since it launched. So so it's been phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll make sure that when we put the show notes out, we'll make sure there's a link, I think, in there to go across the symptom check. That'd be good.
Yeah, that'd be really good. Thanks.
So, good. Claire, it's been brilliant to have you on. I'm so grateful for your time. Our final question, really, for you is, and this is I mean, not that any of the questions are prepared, and we just see where we go, but puts people a little bit on the spot. If you were to reflect on your career to date, and you could go back to your younger self and give yourself, a piece of career advice, or a nugget of information, or something that you've learned, although you picked up a little bit, I guess, about being your authentic self in all scenarios. But what do you think that piece of advice might be?
I think that, I mean, I'm probably being reductive, but I think the reason I've got to where I am now is because I am nosy, but curious. I think I would say be curious. Ask all the questions. Try to go to team meetings which don't relate to you. They might be in a different team. Go and speak to your services colleagues. What are they doing? What's the next thing coming up? Talk to people in comms and media. Take every opportunity of doing any training course you ever can, and just learn. Be curious, be nosy, because I think then you really do understand an organisation in its whole, and that can only be a good thing, especially when you're sort of moving up within your career, because actually that cross-organisational knowledge, understanding, and then working is key as you get sort of higher up the ladder. So I think what I used to consider to be nosy, now I'm reframing as curious, but I think that has sort of stood me in good stead as I've gone through my career.
Perfect. No, that's great. And I'm sure for those that listen, there may well be questions or things that they might want to, I don't know, maybe run past you. I mean, obviously, we'll put links across to the Crohn's and Colitis UK website if people want to go and find out more about the charity and organisation. Are you happy if we tag you up on LinkedIn when we post this, so that if people got questions, happy to reach out and go?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Reach out. Anybody who wants to speak or, wants any more information or anything, then I'll be happy to help.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Claire, thanks again. It's been brilliant to have you on, and look forward to seeing how things develop and grow across the organisation over the coming years.
Yeah, thanks very much. Nice to speak to you.
And that's a wrap for this week on the Charity Changemakers podcast. Remember, you can be the change you want to see in the world. We hope that this episode has inspired you to get out there and make a difference. This podcast was brought to you by Charisma Charity Recruitment, one of the UK's leading recruitment consultancies for the charity sector. Whether you're a passionate professional seeking your next challenge or a charity searching for a top-tier talent, Charisma Charity Recruitment can help. Visit their website at charismarecruitment.co.uk to explore their latest positions and to connect your organisation with the changemakers shaping the future of the non-profit world. Thanks for joining us.
Today I'm joined by Claire Walsh, who's the Director of Income Generation and Marketing at Crohn's and Colitis UK. You're going to love this conversation. There's so much in there for you to take away, from learning from Claire's experience and her rise to director level role within fundraising, and her generalist experience across a whole range of different income streams, and being able to take those opportunities as they come, qualifications and training, and mentoring and learning from others through the sector. There's also some really interesting parts of the conversation where we talk about some fundraising in an international context. Claire has lived and worked in Singapore and Hong Kong, as well as then some reflection on her time at Crohn's and Colitis UK and managing a team that's gone from being very office-based to being remote-based, and some of the opportunities and challenges that come with that. Personally, I'm absolutely delighted that Claire agreed to come onto the show. I've never met Claire and hadn't spoken to her before, but reached out to her to come on the show as I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis nearly 20 years ago, and the charity's been a great support to me, and I've been a member for a number of years. So the opportunity to highlight the incredible work that they're doing. You'll notice that there's some links through to a variety of different places on their website in the show notes for today. So if you're suffering or going and need to use their symptom checker, then please do follow the links below in the notes. Guys, it's enough from me. It's time to meet our changemaker.